Which of these three releases is the mo better? We're going to find out. Put on your hard hats. We're doing a shootout in the mine. The cars, shake it up.
Thank God for Chris Bellman! Hey, let's get through this quick.
Like I said, welcome back to the mine. This is kind of a special song mine because I don't really do shootouts. Why? Because I generally don't collect more than one copy of a record. In this case, I happen to have an OG from earlier days, and then I've got the Mofi because I thought, well, this OG sounds a little messy, you know, just a little bit. It's not perfect, and you know, geez, if there's a perfect version out there of a record that I love, then I definitely want to check it out. I want to hear it, and the only way you can do that in this case is if you find yourself one, find yourself a Mofi, and they happen to be in print at the moment. Of the three, the Mofi is the most expensive to this day, and so that's kind of curious, and we'll kind of see why, kind of explore why. Maybe we'll figure that out. Now, what does a shootout mean for me? What a shootout means for me is I put on the first one. In this case, I'm going to do the OG, which is this one right here. It's a 1981 George Marino Master Sterling Sheffield Specialty Press, which is that like S shape in the dead wax. Anyway, it's a fantastic copy, and we're going to talk about them one by one, but that's up first. And generally what I do is I base everything off that, right? Because that to me is the artifact. That to me is the reason that it became so popular, because of the way that sounded. So to me, that's going to be what Rick Ocasek, Ben Orr, definitely Rick Ocasek, but likely Ben Orr and other guys wanted when they wanted to put out the original copy. Now, there have been other releases that I don't have that have been actually from Rhino. In the last 10 years, there's been at least two different Rhino releases. Both of those, from what I understand, are digital cuts. And if you have any of those, please put in the comments what you think about those copies. Especially if you have what we're going to rate and do a shootout with today. I'm starting with the OG because I think that's where you start. And then I think the real battle, you would think, comes between the two albums that are considered, audiophile quality. And in this case, it's the Mofi, which is a gatefold, and then the Rhino High Fidelity, which I was saying is the most recent. So we're going to see. You'd think it's between these two. Maybe it's not. Maybe it is. Maybe I've given too much away. So I remember when this record came out, when it was like off the charts. The reason that I became a Cars fan, I'll tell you right now, there's a couple of big reasons, but the first reason that made me aware of the Cars was because I remember when this record went on sale, there was a grocery store in the neighborhood that I lived. And the grocery store was called Skaggs. It was on the Upper West Side of El Paso, and it was now it's called an Albertsons, but there was a record section right near one of the entrances, on the side entrances on the front, because I think they were worried about people walking off with records. But and it's also where they had a lot of tobacco products, oddly enough. I don't know. Anyway, whatever. But my point is that they had records in there, and I remember like Blondie's The Hunter. I remember some Cher record that was there. Basically, like all that stuff that's in the background of Fast Times at Ridgemont High. This was coming around in that same time, and so you figure the Cars were already a pretty big band. This is maybe one of the top three, in my opinion, of their records to begin with, and that's saying a lot considering that they've got some great records. They've got a couple stinkers maybe, but they've got some great records, and even on the stinkers, they've got some great singles on them. So it's hard to say, is it a stinker? I don't know. If you're a Cars fan at all, maybe not, especially if you can find an OG like this, especially a clean one, for very inexpensive. This is a value when you can find one inexpensively. But you now have the Rhino Reserve to kind of compete with it. And I'll say it does compete with it pretty well. Not giving too much away yet, but this sounds fantastic. So let's talk about this record one by one.
Since you're gone,
First up, upon listening to the OG 1981 George Marino mastering, Sterling Sheffield cut, specialty pressing, this was and sounds great. If you have this copy, or you already have this record and it's clean, or you find one out in the wild, as they say, grab it, because it sounds great. If you don't want to shell out what the other two cost, and they do cost more than what this will sell used, the only problem is, of course, is that this is going to be a little noisier. You can't help it. These songs were slamming songs. People that had this record probably played it a whole lot. I started collecting vinyl a while back, long enough to where this was pretty plentiful to get, and I got pretty inexpensively back at my friend Good Records. Chris Penn, cheers, man. Point is, if you have this OG, especially if you got it, it says G.Marino in the mix, and there's also a Warner Brothers kind of holographic little sticker right there that signifies that it's an actual Warner Brothers print. The only reason I bring that up is because you may have a Columbia House version, which might sound okay, especially if you've got a system that really is forgiving. When I say forgiving, I mean like it's not picky about the kind of records that you play. Having said that, if it's not picky, that means you're not picky, and that means that it's going to just sound at best okay. Depending on your setup, though, it might be all you need. I'm just telling you that if on the OG you find this little Warner sticker right here, you know you've got an OG. One of the great things about this pressing is that it's very punchy. Everything's very clear. The low end is not like, it's never going to be one of these like rumbling low end, going to rattle your bass type records, but it's punchy and it's all there. I believe it probably benefits from some compression that was big in that time period in the 80s. Everything was designed to sound good on FM radio, and it definitely has that FM radio warm but really clear and punchy presence, and it fills up your room fantastically. If you want to go digging, this shouldn't be too hard to find, but go get them now, because they're going to get harder and harder to find, especially because of course OGs are OGs, and you can only have so many OGs because there's no more OGs. They're not making OGs anymore. All right? What's up next? What's up next? The Mofi. All right, miners, this is the Mofi gatefold, half-speed mastering, all analog, apparently, and it says so on the website. I bought this after Mofi Gate. Since Mofi Gate, you may know they've become very transparent about whether or not their source material is analog or if it's digital. They've worded things very cleverly, so make sure that you know what you're looking for. But basically, you're looking for nothing that says, anything that says DSD or some kind of number with megapixels and megabytes or whatever, then you know that they're telling you that's digital, even if they say from the original analog tapes. What Mofi does, for the most part, they digitize it in the best way they know. Then they take it home and they cut a record from it. And that's cool, but let me put it this way. If a record's available as an all analog cut and it's guaranteed to sound at least pretty good, then I think I want the all analog cut from the actual tape, no digital middleman. Now, if it was recorded digitally, screw it. I mean, and there's some records that in the early 80s, imagine that, were recorded digitally. Less and less were recorded analog through the 90s, of course, we know about that. And hardly anything is now, but this was cut by tape, and if there's a tape, then that's all analog. Those are analog sound waves going to the microphone through the wires and right eventually to that lathe needle and cutting it right on there. There's no processing of anything else. There's no digitizing and bringing it back. If it was recorded digitally and never put on vinyl before, that's a different story. I'm buying it vinyl for the first time, well, that's no problem. But as long as there's a possibility, that you can get an all analog cut and it's going to sound pretty good, I'm going to go for the all analog cut unless it doesn't cost me an arm and a leg. In which case, at this point in my life, I think I might be out if it gets too expensive. The nice thing about both the Mofi and the Rhino Reserve that we'll talk about next is while they're audiophile quality, or they tout themselves as being audiophile quality, they're not the craziest expensive version of that. They're not an UHQR, they're not in the hundreds of dollars yet. I don't expect that they would be. I think that their reason is to get this stuff to the people. And they know at this point that the best presentation that they give to the people, that the more sought after it's going to be, the more, dare I say, fetishized. But anyway, it's become popular, especially if you're really into it. They need to be really careful in a bad economy of getting too expensive with these records, I'm afraid. But that's why I'm here, to tell you which one to buy, which one you don't need, and what to do if you get the wrong one. Let's talk about how this mobile fidelity sounds. While we're at it, I'm going to go ahead and tell you now. The list of what I run this through, all three of my copies here, is down here in the description. Okay, so I'll tell you, it's a quick description. Anyway, the Mofi.
She can show you things that make you weak.
It's not cut very hot in comparison to the original. It's cut very, very. I don't want to say it's flat. It's definitely not as dynamic right off the bat. I will tell you that. I don't know. I think that it's probably a lot of that compression is taken off, which I can appreciate. So to be fair with the original, what I did was I went ahead and turned it up on the gain on my preamp, and I run it through a tube wash through a preamp before I go through the amp. And so that kind of gives it a little warmth, but it gives everything the same amount of warmth, and I didn't change that. It's flat EQ, nothing, I don't change any of that. It just goes through my tube stuff. Anyway, regardless, I had to give it a little more gain to make it fair for the other one, because I know that a lot of times, simply because something is cut lower doesn't mean it sucks. It just means that you got to turn it up a little bit more. The good thing that Mofi is known for, and the good thing about this Mofi, is that it's cut on very quiet vinyl, so you can put it really low. The cut can sound really low and turn it up, and you're not raising that loudness, and you're not raising the threshold of the loudness of the vinyl itself with it, right? So when it's really quiet vinyl, that helps, and that helps this a lot, because you do have to turn it up. Now, having said that, it's not very dynamic. It's very, like, if creamy can be described as bad, it's creamy. And I mean, sometimes you say creamy, it's, oh, great, creamy. No. This is like the version just before you get to music. And I'm sorry that sounds hyperbolic, but yeah, it's not bad. It's quiet, but it's like if I was buying this for my grandparents, I would buy them this copy. I'd say, oh, this sounds great. They'd think they're turning it up, which would be a great little funny thing, joke to play on a boomer or something. Sorry, boomers. I know there's a lot of boomers like the cars. Anyway, but that would be a boomer funny joke to play on them, is to give them this one. Now, having said that, they're not going to be disappointed, because anybody that's got a system that's mediocre is going to think that this sounds fine, because it sounds just fine. But in comparison to the other one, it doesn't sound as good. It's not as punchy. It's like a bad creamy. It's a bland. Bland is a good way to put it. It's kind of bland in comparison to that OG, that 1981 OG George Marino cut. By the way, speaking of George Marino and who mastered things, one thing that's interesting about Mofi, if you don't already know, is that they don't list who is the mastering engineer the way the other two do. It's funny because those guys now, and I've made the comment with Steve Westman's podcast numerous times, and that is that these guys are these mastering guys are becoming the new rock stars. And my theory, and it seems pretty obvious, is that they don't promote those guys from Mofi because they know they'll go off on their own. You got your Kevin Grays, your Chris Bellmans, your Bernie Grunmans, who's like the OG of OGs. He's like the GOAT. He's he's still doing it too, by the way. And from what I understand, still all the stuff still sounds great. I've got a lot of that stuff that Bernie Grunman has cut over the years. Anyway, and you've got your Levi's, and you got your Matthew Luthans. Matthew Luthans is going to be cutting, from what I understand, the remainder of the Rhino Reserve, or many of the next ones. We'll talk about some more of those later. The mobile fidelity is kind of a disappointment. And I'll say this, it's the most expensive of the three. It's not the craziest expensive Mofi in the world, especially for being an analog cut, but it is definitely not the best sounding of the three. I'll tell you that right now. So if that gives too much away, you can be done. So we'll see. Up next is the Rhino Reserve, cut by Chris Bellman. Up next is the Cars Rhino Reserve, in this case cut by Chris Bellman. It's one of the few that I think are going to be cut by Chris Bellman, though he may do more. I know Matthew Luthans is doing a few now. And one of the nice things about the Matthew Luthans cut, if you're a fan of all tube systems, that Matthew Luthans stuff was done on an all tube system that was bought by Chad Cassams. It was Doug Sachs's old machine or setup. And now they've got Matthew Luthans running it over there in Salina, Kansas at the mastering lab. That machine was once worked on by Kevin Gray, who's now doing the Rhino High Fidelity series exclusively, I think. So anyway, kind of a incestuous situation there. Again, these mastering engineers are the new rock stars. I'm telling you, they list their names on the labels oftentimes, as in, ooh, this guy mastered this one, this guy mastered this one. I would say all the people that we've named tonight in the mastering world, even among the folks that come out of Mobile Fidelity, would agree that Kevin Gray at Coherent is the king at this time. Anyway, let's talk about how this one sounds. This one sounds great, man. Chris Bellman hit this one out of the park. I don't know that this one could sound any better for a reissue, and I say that with this caveat that you can hear kind of baked into it, and I'll explain in a second. But this is more than any of the other two, and among the three, this is the most detailed. And why do I say that? There are parts of this, the little clicks, synth that starts like in Since You're Gone, that are so prevalent and way up front, and like they're just kind of crispy and great in your ears. Fantastic candy, not candy-o, but candy in your ears when they hear it, that you don't hear on even the OG, definitely not on the Mofi. The guitars sound crunchier, the bass is really warm, and it's all there. The only problem is sometimes, to me, I will say that the kick drum sounds a little thuddy, and I mean that to sound like, that kind of means to me that it's not a clip, but it's kind of been truncated somehow, at least on my system, that I don't hear on the OG. Like I said, I think though that the OG does benefit from the compression that is purposely not done on this one. Why is it not done? Because a lot of audiophiles prefer that it's not compressed and that it's more just of a flat thing to reveal how good their system is in revealing how good how close it is to the original and what the artist's intent was. I think that there's no question that even though Rick Ocasek is no longer with us, the artist's intent is all here, because you hear things, details that you probably only hear on the master tape, and that's what this came from, is the master tape. It's crispy, it's fantastic. Of the three, this is the most detailed of them all, the Rhino Reserve, cut by Chris Bellman. And let's talk about a little interesting thing too. This was purchased from Mobile Fidelity, from the website at the time when I got it. It's still a numbered copy, frankly lower than one would think when I got it, but I've had it for a little while now. But it was purchased before they got their lab opened up called Fidelity Pressings, okay? Here's the interesting thing. The new Rhino Reserve was pressed at Fidelity Pressings, which is the place now where all the Mofis are going to be pressed, because it's their own and they own it. And why not do it there? Save on costs. Don't have to pay a third party. It's yours. You do the pressings. You get to say how they go. As your quality control is in your control. Your quality control is totally in your control. This one was not pressed at Mobile Fidelity's pressing plant in California, though this one was. This one costs $8 more than this one. They're both apparently all analog cuts. This one is cut very low in the mix. This one is cut very high and hot in the mix, though efficiently, because they know how to do that now. So who's the winner of the shootout in the mine between the Cars OG, Shake It Up, Mobile Fidelity, all analog cut, half speed, gatefold, or the new Rhino Reserve, all analog cut, both pressed at high fidelity?
Shake it up. Shake it up. Shake it up.
Well, I have to say it's kind of close, and it's not close. It's close because the two top finalists, the two 1 and 2, are within maybe 0.5 of each other in quality. The loser is significantly behind them all, and not just because, and I guess you know which one that is, because it's cut lower in the mix. It's cut lower in the mix, but it is also just not the dazzling mastering that you would hope for in what we call a audiophile quality record. This is a lower cut, but when you bring it up, it's just kind of not great. Here's one thing that I didn't say before. The low end, because you're turning it up, is not punchy, it's not crisp, it's not efficient, it's bloaty. It sounds like when you're low end, if you don't have a subwoofer that really can like cut through that, like then you're just gonna have a bloaty room. You're gonna think you'd have some, you're gonna think you need sub traps, and maybe that would help if you've got sub traps, which are kind of like kind of suck away those out of the corners, the sub resonating so horribly. But it's a warbly bad low end, especially since you have to turn up the gain. So this is number 3. I'm sorry, Mofi. It sucks too because this is a pretty low number, and I'm not going to tell what number it is. But it's a pretty low number, relatively speaking. And yeah, man, it's too bad. It's a very quiet vinyl, but I would tell you that it would be one thing that if they run out of all the other ones in the world, this would be a good one when you're ready to give one to your grandparents. Number 2, in the mine, I have to give it to, I'm sorry, the Rhino Reserve. But here's the thing. This Rhino Reserve still sounds great. That's just to say, and now the obvious thing is, that the other one is number 1. But what makes this just number 2, and I say just, I mean, in the world of greatness, this is number 2. I give this an overall score very close to the OG. And the reason is because it's so damn detailed. Like I said, there's a crispiness, there's the jingles at the very bit, those like kind of snappy claps that's at the beginning of Since You're Gone, right at the top of the record. I mean, right off the bat. Then the bass comes in. It's not warbly like the Mofi. It's very tamed but bouncy. The only drawback, like I'll say, is that sometimes the kick drum does sound kind of thuddy, and the original doesn't have that problem. So I know that it's possible that it doesn't have to sound like. I know that it's possible that it doesn't have to sound like that because the OG doesn't. Having said that, everything else on here is the most detailed of all of them. So this is a high scoring, very well done. And if all you can find now and you don't want to do any digging, you're going to love this. If you don't feel like doing any digging and you're worried that even if you do find a copy of Shake It Up, an OG, it's going to be a little noisy, it's going to have some scratches. Look, these albums, when they were originally bought, were loved. They were played because they were loved. They were loved because they were played. The singles, the first 3 songs on here are bangers. I mean, you know, they say a lot of these Cars records are greatest hits unto themselves, and that's no joke. Who is number 1? Well, you know it by now by a process of elimination, but that is the OG. And you know, you might be surprised for me to say that. Some of you might say, how is that possible? Because how is that possible? Because Chris Bellman is such a good mastering engineer. But I would even say that he would understand why I say this. And that is because, like I said, on my stuff, with my ears, the compression that this was given sounds to me like probably I've been used to for a long time. Like I said, since this was in the record section at the grocery store when I was in 3rd grade, which was around 1981. I'm an Xer, so sue me. Anyway, this George Marino OG Sterling Specialty Press is just, it's punchy, it's crisp, it's not quite as detailed, and I say just barely not as detailed as the Chris Bellman most recent cut at Rhino Reserve, but overall it doesn't have that problem with the bass. And I've got, and I love, and many know that I'm all about that bass. I mean, it's true. I love the bass, maybe too much, not quite. Well, you know, I've gotten a lot of shit for how much I like bass. And so if it's not good bass, then it's going to make my shit go, and you know, that's not pleasing to the ear. The way I prefer to hear a bass is very punchy. Like if it's disco, I want to feel it like you're at the disco dance floor. Well, that's kind of the bass that I like to hear. I'm not talking about like I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about like 70s era, really with some bass. Like if you were on the floor, you could feel it. That's what I like. And when it's warbly, it's not pleasant, it's fatiguing. This is not that. It's a little bit, like I said, this I think benefits from some compression, but it's all there, man. And you're going to be very happy if you stumble upon this. Even if it's not that clean, it still might be worth getting. It's fantastic. And so the number 1 version that I own, and again, there are other Rhino reissues that have come out in the last 10 years, but I believe they're all digital, if I'm not mistaken. And again, you can put in the comments if I'm wrong. But among these 3, the Mofi, the Rhino Reserve, the most recent, and the OG, the winner is the OG.
Shake it up. Shake it
Kudos to Chris Bellman for getting out all that detail, even beyond what the original had done. Because, okay, listen, truth be told, the original was mass produced. The cars were a big band at that time. They don't put very many records in grocery stores, even at that time, in comparison to what they had at big record stores. So if they put your record in a record store, it's kind of like today when they put a record at Walmart or Kmart, they're only putting artists that they think are going to sell. The Cars sold plenty of these. So another reason why there might be some available out there in the wild that you might still be able to find. And I would listen to it ahead of time, make sure it's not as, you know, it's as noisy as you can handle. But yeah, if you could find one, you should be able to find one for well under $30, and very likely as little as 15 to 20. I would say these days that's probably a good, probably likely price. If it's a great copy anyway, snatch it up. Now, if you don't want to dig, then this Rhino Reserve is great, man. You're gonna think this is the shizzle because it's got the snizzle and the sizzle. It's got the detail. It's got everything you want. To this day, the Mofi is $8 more than the Rhino Reserve. Online, especially if you're doing a shipping on either one of these cases, you're gonna spend more for the Mofi. I don't mean to diss too much on the Mofi. Mofi has had their own problems, but I have to say, I mean, look, if you're gonna do a comparison, why not get the least expensive? Unless you're just some kind of completist for Mofi. If you don't mind digging and you don't mind being patient, wait, because you might find out that there's something out there for you in the wild. An OG sounds fantastic. Like I was saying, my system is pretty standard. I use an Ortofon cartridge that is used by a lot of these guys. I use a turntable that's used by a lot of these guys. I use a very well recommended, though not over the top expensive preamp, and then it goes through a decent amp that I've had for quite a while. Some would say it's vintage now, and 2-channel out to some very damn good speakers, I think. Best speakers I've ever owned. If you have anything that's at least decent, at least on the standard level, a professional to standard, everything else after that is gravy. But if you at least have that, then you're gonna notice the difference in this and you'll be able to appreciate what these different options have to offer. Many times I've learned now through trial and error that it's very possible, I would say at least 50% of the time, the OG sounds as good or better than the represses. Anyway, thanks for hanging with us in the mine. I have a blast doing this. Like I said, I don't know that I'll always do this. I grew this mustache because I figured, you know, all the kids are doing it. Who knows if I'll keep it? Who knows if I'll ever do a shootout again? I don't guess that I'm gonna have 3 copies of many more things to come, but who knows? If I do, we'll do a shootout. If I don't, more regular episodes of The Mine, in the mine, for the people. And if you dig this, go check out other episodes of SONGMINE. Don't forget to subscribe, like this episode. I mean, I'm playing with these algorithms. We're seeing what works. You notice my face is on the thumbnail now. They say that's a good thing. We'll see. Any suggestions, please tell me. I'll consider them, and we'll go from there. But if you've got perspective about your records, about what you're into, then there's geeks like you, like me out there that want to hear about it, because suddenly this is the community, the vinyl community in the mine, SONGMINE. Hey, if you dig SONGMINE, don't forget, check out episodes over at ktep.org/SONGMINE. There's a whole first season we'll be posting here as we see fit. There'll be plenty to check out in the mine. Get your hard hats, get your flashlights, bring your records. It'll be fun. SONGMINE.
The only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Set your gun, set your gun.